Naivety, being naive. This unforced error I wanted to talk about because it actually can lead to quite a few of the unforced errors I talk about. Because if you're naive, I mean, it's better to be young and naive, right? Because at least you have the time, for some of us at least. At least you'll have the time to correct, although it's still not ideal, but you'll have the time. And that's okay. This is the crossover. Unforced error. Naive. Let me conclude this once and for all. So, let's get to it.
Put some respect on my name. You understand me? When y'all saying my name, put some respect on it.
So this one, I am concluding from the prior unforced errors. You know, part one, part two, and the prelude. Because this one was quite a big one. This is one I'm actually actively going through right now, a pending separation and divorce. There was rain in the mountains about a week or two ago, right? Which is why that emblem's up in the right corner for those of you who recognized it. I talked about that in prior, but I got some clips now that kind of let you know my form of naivety that I was dealing with. Um, I also have some additional clips. They're unlisted, so I will be linking them probably if not in the description, I'll be linking them in the comments section. But those are videos where I actually talk about some more personal details about my relationship, some of the arguments that led up to where we are now, right? And I will say that if I had known what I know now, and I was more willing to just accept it for what I thought it could have been, then I would be single and childless today. And that's a fact. I'm not gonna lie. I would be. Because that's the only conclusion. Because, ironically, one of the questions my wife continuously asked me when we would get in our arguments and stuff, and I'd find out she lied about some certain things, she would ask me like, why did I stick in there? Why was I still there? And to be honest, when I think about it, I knew the answer to her question, but the answer I was going to give wasn't what she was really looking for. She was pretty much alluding to the fact that some relationships they stay together because it's like, okay, we've been in this for this long, why throw it all away at this point? Of course, the person that usually says that is the one who has something to lose, right? But to answer that question, why was I in it for this long? Well, one is because, I mean, straight off the bat, I was lied to from day one, if I'm just being honest. And I couldn't, like, at the time when she was telling me the stuff she was telling me, I can't, there was no way for me to confirm or deny it, to be honest. And though I was privy to some of the red flags she told me early in our relationship, I still had to, I was aware of my own potential ignorance, which was, I could be wrong. I didn't have anyone to tell me for sure whether or not, because a lot of people in my life, they don't got their shit together, unmarried, whatever, whatever, right? So I could not, I couldn't disprove what was right or what was wrong. Today I can. And it's because I kept trying to dive back into some of the things she had said before, and it's when I uncovered some potential lies here and there. Of course, that's usually when she'd be like, "Well, why are you still here? Why are you with me?" and all this stuff. Funny thing was, I did dump her, and it wasn't me that continued the relationship after that. Actually, it was her that was hitting me up that wanted to hang out and So yeah, go figure, right? But like I said, she was saying that not because I had made a genuine decision to be with her. No, she was saying that because she was just trying to allude to the fact that I'm here now. Why question all those things prior, which is what I was doing? Why question all those things that I had said before? Why not just accept it and move on? Well, it's because I can't. Once I learn some new, better information, I do the same thing I always do. I, I, I reestablish my thought processes. I look over damn near everything, and then I realize, you know what? This actually relates to something in my past that doesn't quite fit right. And then I might do a little asking, and usually it's subtle because sometimes I know it could be nothing, but like for example, say, you get a new piece of information. Someone told you that something stupid. Someone tells you that they never ate strawberries, right? And then all of a sudden, somebody tells you that that person that says they never ate strawberries says, well, they told them that, they ate strawberries. Like something stupid right there, right? And then you go to the person and then you ask them, like, hey, I remember you told me that you didn't eat strawberries. And then I heard from someone else that, you ate strawberries. So, like, you want to tell me about that? And then the response of the person, instead of it just being something like, "Oh, they might be lying," or something like that. Because mind you, like, I was skeptical, you could be skeptical of everything you take. You just ask to ask. Well, the person you're asking to confirm or deny the information is pretty much their response isn't to confirm or deny the information. Their response is essentially like, "Why do you wanna know?" And when you get that kind of response, then that makes you do something that, actually Jordan B. Peterson talks about in a clip um, that I'm going to play when he was talking to I can't think of what the other guy's name is, but he's apparently another author and did some psychological works and stuff, right? But actually I think I got the video linked in the description right now. But pretty much, when you ask someone to confirm or deny something, like, hey, you told me you never ate strawberries, and someone else told me you ate strawberries with them, like, so do you eat strawberries or not? And then the person pretty much says, well, why do you want to know? Well, that kind of response, it's one, defensive, and at the same time, two, they probably don't know how to answer it because they can't confirm or deny how much you really know, which is one of those things. That's why I like to actually approach someone just to kind of see what they'll do. Like, I can know somebody did something, but I'll withhold the evidence just to see whether or not they'll continue to lie or try to lie. Because sometimes when you have some evidence, they might be able to explain the evidence away. But when you go to someone, you have the evidence, you kind of, this is something actually some prosecutors, they try to get away with too. But when they have the evidence, you try to hold it because you want to catch them in another lie that contradicts the evidence you have. So now, on top of the original lie, now they can't successfully explain away the evidence that you do have collected. So now it makes them look double suspect. You see? And then now everything kind of unravels. But this one clip, this first clip, while he's having this discussion, they're talking about how some of this process works within a relationship. And this does relate to me being naive because it was my naivety that led me to believing a lie. And then when I later discovered information and knowledge that really made me question those lies, or what I would soon find out were lies, then it would make me question everything before it, right? So everything before or everything since that lie is now in question. And that's pretty much what some of these clips refer to. So the first clip is this one.
This is the sort of thing that I saw a lot in my clinical practice. So because he lied about that, she no longer knows whether anything he's told her or anything he's done is true or real. Because he's violated this basic presupposition of trust. And so part of the reason she's going to have a major emotional reaction to that is that she now doesn't know whether she can trust anything about him. And may have to reevaluate all her perceptions of him, even those that are part of the past.
So, like he explained in that, actually, if you transpose that onto me, it's actually the male, not the female. He's talking about it from the perspective of the female who was cheated on or something like that, and the husband lied or so. I think that's his scenario he gave. And what people don't realize is and this is another thing that I have an issue with my wife that I actually talk about. It's like, okay, when I catch her lying, it's like the response isn't, the all forgiving, I'm sorry I lied. It's more so like the, okay, well, this is the truth, let's move on. It's like, okay, well, why did you have to lie about that? Or there's never any reconciliation for it. It's just like all right, let's move on. Not directly like that, but because of my EQ, it's kind of hard to explain in words. But it's just like that's the mood of the situation. Like, okay, you know, you you know, let's move on. You know, so what he was saying essentially is because of me being naive, I was willing to believe some of the lies early on. But eventually, as things went along, I would question certain things that were going on. And I was, of course, because I didn't have any valid examples to take information from around me, everybody else would actually reinforce the lie. And it's just like, so I stuck in there for whatever point it was until there were specific incidences where she then became my side chick, and then I completely cut her off. So that I will admit to. There were some things where all up until that point where I was actually able to witness and confirm what it was. I to somewhat went against some of my own instincts. Remember I said I was privy to some of those red flags? I said this in a prior video. Well, I went against some of my instincts that were kind of like, that's a red flag. You might not, and then again, my naive self was like, oh, well, you could be wrong. And then it kind of quieted I don't want to say suspicions, but it quieted my worries or my concerns all the way up until I actually got some genuine, like, okay, yeah, this is what it is. This is serious. And then I kind of slowly but surely separated myself from her. She became my main chick for a time, and then once I gave her an opportunity to try to win my favor again, which once again this is me being naive. I gave her an opportunity to try to win my favor again, and then sure enough, I had to cut her off because of another incident. So I completely cut her off. Now, what you have to understand is, of course, until this day, she's still the same about talking about any of that stuff in the past. It's why are we talking about this? Let's move on. And the problem is, I can't, much like Jordan was saying, my reality, especially with anything she says to me, I can't trust anything, which I've actually grown to be okay with because I shouldn't have to. I don't trust many people, to be honest. She was actually one of the only, if not one of the few, if not only people I actually trusted to some extent. Um, Aside from a few key family members, right? But even that level of trust is limited. But let's just say I gave her a little more trust than others because she had given me a couple years of favor where I was like, okay, I could somewhat reasonably trust her. But once you catch someone lying, especially when they start lying about just anything and everything, I'm talking about just stupid dumb life lies like the sky's blue, and then they're like, no, it's not, and then it's like, okay, where are we going with this? So then it's like you literally question everything that they say or everything that they do, and then it's like that's really why when certain situations like that, when the trust is broken in a relationship, that's why it's damn near impossible to kind of get it back, because then now that person questions damn near everything not only that you're doing from that point forward, they actually start questioning things before, like the entirety of them knowing you, like from day one. Shit, you could have been lying to me straight out the gate. All that other stuff I believed, and it morphs their reality because that period of time where they were in bliss and everything was going good, now they have to be able to reconcile with that everything actually wasn't bliss and everything wasn't good. It was all a lie to some extent. And actually, there's a couple more clips where they actually get into this. It was actually a very good conversation, and how they were explaining this because he explained it exactly how I was trying to explain it to my significant other because the way he was explaining it is exactly how I was explaining it. I was like, you do know, like when you lie, like I literally have to question everything now, which is why it was making it so difficult. But here's the next clip.
What's the error?
The error is that the presumption of her fantasy that her marriage is stable and loving and, let's say, also monogamous.
So that's an error, you're saying. And now she's got a message that she's in error. So now what's the...
Right, but that's all she has. That's the problem, right? And all she has is a message that she's in error. It doesn't contain much other information. And it's going to be extremely hard for her to reconstruct all that theorizing she's done based on the assumption, erroneous assumption of monogamy. And so it's easiest just not to do it.
Yes, and then what's the cost of her not doing it?
Well, I would say the immediate cost is virtually nothing. And that's another advantage. But the long-term cost is that she's building a future reality based on a mispresumption. And so she may make errors, for example, about her financial security going into the future, or even the presence of her partner. And that's a huge potential cost. She's going to underestimate, for example, the danger of divorce.
So essentially, what he's saying in that is like, because of that lie, that big or whatever lie it was, because of that, it creates a it's like an error. So every time she thinks back on her partner and everything, there's this error message, and it's like there's that sense of feeling like something's just wrong, you know? Like, because like when the person tells you, okay, that's they lied about something, you caught them lying, and then they're like, okay, I'm sorry for lying, and then it's like, let's just move on, and then it's like y'all try to move on with your lives like everything's normal, but all the while there's still that inkling like in the back of your mind where it's like, okay, there's an error there. And that error is just like, okay, you can't just move on from that. They literally just lied to you straight up. So now you literally have to like it's one of two things. They've literally showed the ability and willingness to lie to you in order to deceive you. This is someone that you're supposed to be able or willing to trust. And when you think about it like that, that's very big. That's very I mean, that's very substantial in any relationship. I just gotta say. And then also he tags along the back end of that where it's like, okay, because of that error, there's like a I don't know, it's like a contradiction in your mind, which he does talk about the contradicting messages that someone might get mentally from it. But in his next clip, he kind of tags along with how they just want to get away, and this one of the I think there is some way of how this could contribute, but of course he's talking about in a situation where the relationship's not monogamous. So he's talking about a very specific dynamic. But let's just be real, and if I'm just being honest, women do cheat more than men. So there's no telling how much it could be the opposite way, right? Although the majority of marriage divorces are filed by the women, right? So he's talking about how because of the error message that she's getting, she might not necessarily think of other risk outside of the current risk that she's in, which is okay, there's an error because your spouse lied to you, therefore she's just thinking, just let me end it and get away from him, but she's not assessing the other risk, which might even be greater, which is the divorce.
She may make errors, for example, about her financial security going into the future, or even the presence of her partner. And that's a huge potential cost. She's going to underestimate, for example, the danger of divorce or of him leaving.
In order to avoid facing the pain and the
Yes, well, and I think this idea maps onto your hypothesis that at times the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere can be delivering contradictory messages. So if the left is linguistic and generates up detailed propositional arguments, let's say, that get held with some certainty, and the right emotionally signals error, then there's a tremendous amount of work that has to be done in order to unpack that error and remake all those propositional presumptions. It's really hard.
That's what I don't understand in your argument. I don't understand why there's a huge amount of work where she's got to unpack a whole endless series of assumptions or arguments just because of this one thing.
So, of course, he gives a valid, I think it's Trivers or Trivers. I can't think of his name. But the thing is, it's because, like I explained before in with the other clips, she literally has to, in this scenario, she literally has to rethink everything she knows about her partner, her spouse, because initially her thought was her spouse wasn't deceptive towards them, her spouse was honest, and now because that is breaking, has fallen apart. Okay, now what else have they lied to me about? You see? Are the finances possibly in turmoil because my spouse told me the finances were okay? And like, did they lie about that? Did they lie about, like the rent being paid? Did they lie? You see what I'm saying? So it's like it literally makes you question everything. And this does relate to me being naive. Because I'm not gonna lie. I did have my concerns. I had quite a few actually. And of course, I tell you about how, in one of those videos, I talk about the circumstances with my daughter and how that was really the major um, turning point for me, where I absolutely realized that my spouse might actually be willing to not only, I mean, I already know. I mean, let's just be real. Most women are manipulative. Let's just be real. But not only is she willing to be that, but she's also willing to be deceptive and to some extent saboteuring. So that worries me because I talk about, in the burn the house down where she's absolutely willing to burn the house down. That was what I believe is probably the majority of the reason, but there could be numerous reasons that lead to the same conclusion. That was the narcissistic, this is my power kind of thing. But there's also the thing where, okay, because I'm the husband, I'm taking on the majority of the risk because I'm seen as being the leader. But what good is being the leader if we know that I'm going to take on most of the risk, but publicly we make it seem as if I'm not the leader. Meaning, and this is kind of a weird dynamic. Most women are okay being led in a relationship until you tell them that you're the leader, you're leading them, which is kind of crazy. Even though Jason Black does talk about how women actually want to be deceived and whatever, it's kind of crazy because it's like, okay, if you try to think about it too much, it'll kind of, you know, your brain will probably shit out, right? But if you think about it, in my relationship, I have been the leader. Like my wife was absolutely okay going wherever I went. Actually, there's a thing when we were in college, my roommates would kid about how she was always in my room. She would spend shit months, like she'd pack a bag of clothes and everything, be over in my place. She was literally living in my dorm room, even though technically it wasn't legal. But she'd have a whole dorm room and all that, her room, but she'd always be over in my place. So that dynamic, it's odd because it's like, okay, it's okay taking on unlimited risk as the leader, which is what leaders do. You're accountable for everything. But when you try to access any of the powers, when you try to acknowledge it, like I said, the moment you say you're the leader, then everything goes out the window. Then there's problems from then on. Good luck. After that, everything's out the window. It's like, and then that's when you get into the recalcitrant behavior. Talk about wrong one. Talk about the sisterhood, that earlier unforced error, and that's when the problems start to come out. And that's when people start making certain decisions, which, life happens, blah, 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 which is what he's talking about. Because sometimes they'll just talk about the divorce and everything like it just happened. I was like, no, it didn't just happen. There's a reason. But, life happens. That's what some people say. But there was something he was saying about the contradictory messages that I actually did want to touch on before I get to the conclusion. And the conclusion is actually, uh, it can relate to naivety, not from my point of view, but from the woman's point of view. But the contradictory message, here's the clip.
I think this idea maps onto your hypothesis that at times the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere can be delivering contradictory messages. So if the left is linguistic and generates up detailed propositional arguments, let's say, that get held with some certainty, and the right emotionally signals error, then there's a tremendous amount of work that has to be done in order to unpack that error and remake all those propositional presumptions. It's really hard.
That's what I don't understand in your argument. I don't understand why there's a huge amount of work where she's got to unpack a whole endless series of.
Okay, so it's like that contradicting message. It makes problems until you're able to just, I talk about earlier how that contradictory message with one of his clients that he talked about, and it was either the antidote to chaos, Jordan Peterson, either the antidote to chaos or beyond order, where he was talking about one of his clients and he struggled with understanding that people were absolutely capable of committing evil, right? And he was actually suffering from like actual like physical, you know, I think it was what was it, epilepsy or something, seizures or something, like night terrors or something. Like he was physically suffering because of it, because he had a spouse who tried to assault him, and he had a somewhat of a mental break, and it actually led to physical, you know, consequences. Well, there's also the mental consequences, because remember how he was saying how when you have that break in reality, the initial cost, it's low, but it makes you undervalue, or you don't assume that actually, like in his scenario, she doesn't assume the cost of divorce, because we already know what usually happens after a divorce. It usually doesn't end well for most folks, especially the women. But because they undervalue that, despite all the facts and everything, they undervalue it because maybe there's that mental part where it's like, okay, screw everything. And talk about self-sabotage and everything, burning the house down, where it's like, screw everything, I'm just taking everything with me. And that's just sometimes what happens. But there was something in this conversation that it actually does relate somewhat to something that I've heard Jason Black say on one of his broadcasts, and it relates to how um, somewhat the naivety of women, and how they're not able to efficiently tell the difference between I think it's like power, abuse, and some positive male characteristics that eventually, like, alpha male power kind of concept, right? To pull it up real quick. I can play the clip. I'm gonna go ahead and play the clip.
Oftentimes, women who find themselves in those situations aren't sophisticated enough for one reason or another to distinguish between power, aggression, and competence. And so when they see someone acting aggressively, they infer competence.
Uh-huh.
So part of unpacking that would be to help them distinguish between those two, to know that there is a distinction between the raw expression of power and competence.
Well, there
And then
certainly is. I had no idea that was that confusion was involved in the behavioral problem we're talking about. But certainly, Jesus Christ, there's a difference between competence and abuse.
Okay, well, I was speaking with an evolutionary psychologist, David Buss,
Yes.
just yesterday. And David Buss has looked at the relationship between dark triad behavior, so that's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and aggression. I might have the third one wrong, but that's basically it. Now, younger inexperienced women are much more likely to be attracted to dark triad guys. And that's partly, as far as I can tell, because they haven't had the experience to distinguish between narcissism, let's say, and success, and the confidence that comes with success. And that's an example of that inability to distinguish between aggression and competence.
So that last part he's saying, so he's saying how they couldn't effectively distinguish between power, aggression, and competence, which we know that competence typically leads to power, and you might need some level of aggression to accomplish certain tasks, but not always in that order. Especially aggression doesn't always come first, because actually aggression in today's society can lead you to jail, which is why a lot of the jails are filled with certain men that lack, um, how can I say it? They didn't get the proper male role models to show them how to temper, not void themselves of their emotions, but to temper their emotions and control their emotions and understand that you don't need to be overly aggressive. Thus, why they're in jail. Now, the reason why that last part where he's talking about how younger females tend to drift towards the dark triad traits is because it's something that links to what Jason Black had said earlier, which is when we're young and in school, of course, when we're young, women have the advantage because that's when they're at the peak of their value. But when we're young and in school, none of us are making money. We're all in school. We're in a certain dynamic where they put you in a school and you're not really able to get out there and earn like we are later in life, because then competence is valued. Well, competence in school is high grades. We already know the guys that had the high grades in school, they're usually deemed the nerds and they actually get picked on quite a bit, even though they go on to be the most competent in society. So go figure, right? But this actually plays into that dynamic why they value the dark triad traits, because they can't distinguish between competence, power, and aggression. Well, the bigger, stronger males are the more aggressive ones. And because our competence only leads to something on paper, which is grades, it doesn't lead to income or money, because we all have, virtually almost all of us have the same income potential when we're in school, right? We all have to work at a job somewhere. Some some have the, especially depending on their pedigree, some of them have the ability and willingness to get some, money together and go do their own entrepreneurial thing, right? But for the most part, most of us, we're all limited in our abilities because we have to go to school. So we're limited in our abilities outside of earning money, because most of our providers when we're young are our parents. So because of that, the women are having their financial needs met by their parents. Therefore, they're able to go after those dark triad traits being aggression, and they see power in that aggression, of course, early on, because, when you're physically dominant in school, i.e., that's why, usually the jocks or something like that. Of course, they also have the potential for financial gains later in life, right? But even though the majority of them don't make it, but like I said, it's we're being idealistic here. So they go after the jocks, the big physical, the cute boys sometimes, the guys that can get all the whatever. So that's why the darker triads he's talking about with the younger females, because they're having the financial needs and everything met with their parents. However, when they get out into the real world, then that's when you notice the dynamic changes. And that usually doesn't happen until after 25, because then they go to college and once again they're still probably having their financial needs met by financial aid and their parents, because damn near every chick that I met in college was still getting money from their parents, if I'm just being honest. So they're still able to, and that's why they go through that kind of hoe phase. That's why that's actually promoted, I believe, because they're able to bypass, at least for that moment in time, their financial needs, because they're getting it unearned, which, where this is going. Someone that's getting unearned benefits for extended period of time early in life tends to lead to certain, I want to say, narcissistic behaviors later in life. And then imagine them trying to put that demand on whatever guy that they get on or get with later in life. So now they're taking on that guy's taking on the financial burdens. But remember, early in life, they were getting all that stuff unearned. So they're expecting this guy to do it straight out the gate, because it's like, okay, you're going from dad to husband. But dad didn't have to be her husband to do what he was doing. Therefore, she's looking at her husband like, okay, you're supposed to be taking daddy's spot. But at the same time, she might not necessarily be trying to be his wife per se. Most, damn near all women will say they want to be a wife, but they don't really want to be a wife because they don't know what that really means. So in that clip where he's talking about, you know, women aren't able to tell the difference because whether or not they're taught it properly, or society, which I will say society for the most part negates all of that for a reason. Of course, there's reasons for that, that is the naivety of women. So that's why I was relating it to this, because whereas your unforced error as a young man, ladies are going to have unforced errors too. Naivety, all these unforced errors. Of course, I relate them to the guys, but this unforced error, this is why I said naivety is big, because it also relates to the ladies. Because when you're young and naive as a lady, you make your choices. That absolutely affects the way you perceive the world later in life, especially if you're unwilling to change your ideology, you update your lexicon, see the world differently than you've what you've known to see it when you were a teenager. You'd be surprised. Maybe you wouldn't, but I'll just say I'm not surprised at how many older 30, 40 plus year old women and their demeanors, the way they act, the way they talk, the way they speak, it's like I'm talking to an 18-year-old. They've never matured. And that's much more common in women today, um, than at least with the guys I deal with. Now, there are some guys, I will say this, guys are simple. So for the most part, as long as guys have their ideology together, they understand what their objective in life is. So, you know, work hard, die young, provide for your family. That's pretty much that's pretty much the goal. You know, prolong your legacy, right? But the childishness, I will say, the immaturity definitely, because of the way society is structured. It definitely, yeah, there's a lot more immature ladies out here than there are men. Because as an immature guy, you get dealt with early. What's that 50 Cent song? Damn, homie, in high school you was the man, homie. What the fuck happened to you? Yeah, because he had everything going for him when he was young, He might have been physically strong and capable, but he was incompetent, and he tried to remain immature. Yeah, he gets dealt with quickly, straight out of school. So that's why I say, like, today, like, yeah, you'll run into a lot more immature women, which is why I find it ironic when, of course, there's a reason when, they always have to try to make it work in their favor, because most of these ladies are single for a reason, right? But they always try to play that whole thing, push that narrative where guys want older women. But if you relate it to this, the funny thing about that is they try to say they're more complex than the younger women, when in fact, because I know them, the majority of them actually are just as immature as those younger women. So it actually doesn't work in their favor. But naivety. So those were the clips that I had to share. And again, I'm going to post some videos in the description for naivety, because, oh man, where there is smoke, I will say this, where there is smoke, man, oh, there could be some briskets on the grill. There could be. But it's just safe to assume that where there's smoke, there's fire. And that's all I gotta say. So naivety, unforced error. Thanks for watching, as always. And I don't want to say embrace the dark side, but you gotta have a healthy balance. It's okay to be a jerk. I'll talk about that in the prior. It's okay to be a jerk. Don't be offended. But there's one thing I will say. If you're gonna do it, get out there and do it.
Don't let me down, man. If you let me down, I don't know what I'd do.
Alright. So this is the conclusion. Look out for those videos in the comments section. So till next time.
お前はもう死んでいる。